The snow fell in thick sheets over the Westbrook estate that December morning, covering everything in a blanket of white that made the world seem pure and untouched. But Marcus Hale knew better than to trust appearances. In his 15 years as a private investigator, he had learned that the most beautiful surfaces often concealed the darkest secrets. The mansion before him stood like a monument to wealth and power, its modern glass facades reflecting the gray winter sky, its infinity pool extending toward the mountain vista like a frozen mirror to nowhere. Marcus stepped out of his black SUV, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees overnight, and everything that could freeze had frozen solid. His boots crunched through the fresh snow as he approached the main entrance, where a woman in her 70s waited with the posture of someone who had never bowed to anyone in her life. Victoria Westbrook, matriarch of the Westbrook financial empire, regarded him with eyes that were as cold as the winter surrounding them. "Mr. Hale," she said, her voice carrying the refined accent of old money and older secrets. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. I trust you understand the delicate nature of this matter." She didn't offer her hand, didn't smile, didn't show any of the warmth one might expect from a grandmother whose grandson had vanished 3 days ago. Marcus noted this immediately. He had dealt with enough wealthy families to know that their grief often wore strange masks, but Victoria's composure felt less like stoicism and more like calculation. "Mrs. Westbrook," Marcus replied, keeping his tone professional. "On the phone, you mentioned that Adrian disappeared after the family gathering on Thursday night. Has there been any contact since then? Any activity on his credit cards, phone records, social media?" He watched her face carefully as he asked these questions, looking for the micro-expressions that people couldn't quite control when they were hiding something. Victoria gestured for him to follow her inside, leading him through a grand foyer where abstract art worth millions hung on walls whiter than the snow outside. "Nothing," she said flatly. "His phone goes straight to voicemail. His credit cards haven't been used. His car is still in the garage. It's as if he simply vanished into thin air." She paused at the entrance to a vast living room where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the estate grounds. But Adrian wouldn't just leave, not without his inheritance at stake. The board meeting is in 6 days, and he was supposed to assume control of the company on his 25th birthday. Marcus felt the first stirring of unease in his gut. Money and inheritance, the oldest motives in the world. "Who else was at the gathering that night?" he asked, pulling out his notebook. The gesture was almost theatrical. He recorded everything on his phone. But people tended to talk more freely when they saw someone writing by hand, as if the old-fashioned method made them feel less surveilled. "The usual suspects," Victoria said with a bitter edge to her voice that caught Marcus off guard. "My son Richard, Adrian's uncle. He's been running the company operations while Adrian completed his education. Then there's my granddaughter Sophia, Richard's daughter. She and Adrian were always close, perhaps too close for cousins." The way she said it made Marcus's instincts flare. Too close. He underlined the phrase in his mind. And of course the staff, though they've been with us for years and are beyond reproach. "I'd like to speak with everyone who was here that night," Marcus said. "And I'll need to see Adrian's room, his last known location, anything that might give us a starting point." He looked out at the frozen landscape, his eyes drawn to the infinity pool that dominated the rear terrace. Even from inside, he could see that its surface was covered in a thick layer of ice, opaque and white like frosted glass. Victoria followed his gaze. "The pool," she murmured, and for the first time Marcus detected something in her voice that might have been fear. Adrian loved that pool. He would swim in it even in winter, said the cold made him feel alive. She turned away from the window abruptly. "Come, I'll take you to his quarters." Adrian's suite occupied the entire west wing of the second floor, a testament to his position as the golden heir. Marcus stepped into rooms that spoke of privilege and restlessness in equal measure. Expensive clothes hung in a walk-in closet larger than most apartments. A desk held a laptop that Victoria said had been password-protected and untouched. But it was the walls that told the real story. Photographs covered every available surface, not the carefully curated family portraits common in wealthy homes, but candid shots that revealed something raw and real. Adrian with his arm around Sophia, both of them laughing at some private joke. Adrian standing beside his Uncle Richard at a company event, the body language stiff and formal despite their smiles. Adrian alone staring out at that infinity pool, with an expression that Marcus could only describe as haunted. He wasn't happy, Marcus said quietly, more to himself than to Victoria. But she heard him and her jaw tightened. Happiness is a luxury, she replied sharply. Adrian had everything: money, looks, intelligence, a future that most people could only dream of. What more could he want? The question hung in the air like an accusation, and Marcus realized that Victoria had probably asked Adrian the same thing many times, never understanding that everything could feel like nothing when you were trapped in someone else's vision of your life. Marcus spent the next hour examining Adrian's rooms with the methodical precision that had made him one of the most sought-after investigators on the East Coast. He found prescription bottles for anxiety medication hidden in a bathroom drawer. He found journals filled with entries that oscillated between ambitious business plans and dark ruminations about legacy and obligation. And he found, tucked into the back of a desk drawer, a series of text messages printed out and saved. The conversation was between Adrian and someone saved only as S, presumably Sophia. The messages were intimate, crossing the line from familial affection into something far more complicated. "We can't keep doing this," one of Adrian's messages read. "She knows. I don't know how, but she knows, and she'll destroy us both if we don't stop." Marcus photographed the messages with his phone, then carefully replaced them exactly as he'd found them. When he emerged from Adrian's suite, he found Richard Westbrook waiting in the hallway. The man was in his late 40s, handsome in the way that expensive grooming and good genetics could achieve, but there was a hardness around his eyes that spoke of years spent feeling overlooked and undervalued. "Mr. Hale," Richard said, extending his hand with the practiced charm of someone who had spent his life in boardrooms. "My mother said you'd be investigating Adrian's disappearance. I want you to know that I'm fully cooperating with your inquiry. Adrian is family, and family comes first." The words were right, but the delivery felt rehearsed, as if Richard had practiced saying them in a mirror. "I appreciate that, Mr. Westbrook," Marcus replied, shaking the offered hand and noting the strength of the grip. A man who wanted to establish dominance even in a gesture of greeting. "I understand you were here the night Adrian disappeared. Can you walk me through what happened?" Richard's expression shifted slightly, a crack in the polished facade. "It was a typical family dinner. We discussed the upcoming transfer of power, the board meeting, the usual business matters. Adrian seemed tense, but that wasn't unusual for him lately. He'd been under a lot of pressure." Richard paused, looking out the window toward the frozen pool. "After dinner, I went to the study to make some calls. The Tokyo markets were opening, and I had some urgent matters to address. When I came out around 11, Adrian was gone. I assumed he'd gone to bed." "And you didn't see him again after that?" Marcus asked, watching Richard's face carefully. "No," Richard said, but his eyes drifted to the left as he said it, a classic tell of deception. "I didn't see him again." Marcus made a mental note and changed tack. "What can you tell me about Adrian's relationship with your daughter, Sophia?" The question landed like a physical blow. Richard's composure cracked completely for a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. Anger, disgust, fear, all mixed together. "My daughter loved her cousin," he said through clenched teeth. "Whatever rumors you may have heard, whatever teenage foolishness might have occurred, it was nothing serious. Sophia is engaged to be married to a very suitable young man from a very appropriate family." "I see," Marcus said neutrally, though he saw far more than Richard probably wanted him to. The use of suitable and appropriate told him everything about how Richard viewed relationships, as transactions, as strategic alliances, as anything but matters of the heart. "I'll need to speak with Sophia as well." "She's resting," Richard said quickly, This has all been very traumatic for her. Perhaps tomorrow would be better. Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'm afraid this can't wait, Mr. Westbrook. Every hour that passes decreases our chances of finding Adrian alive. I'm sure Sophia would want to do everything possible to help her cousin. Richard's jaw worked as if he were chewing on words he wanted to spit out but couldn't. Finally, he nodded curtly. She's in the East Wing Conservatory. But please, Mr. Hale, be gentle. She's fragile. Marcus doubted that very much. In his experience, the children of powerful families were rarely as fragile as their parents claimed. They had to develop armor early just to survive the constant pressure and scrutiny. He found Sophia exactly where Richard had said she would be, sitting among tropical plants that thrived in the heated glass room, while the winter raged outside. She was 23, beautiful in the way that expensive education and excellent bone structure could produce, but her eyes were red from crying, and there was a hollowness to her expression that spoke of genuine grief. "Miss Westbrook," Marcus said softly, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. "I'm Marcus Hale. Your grandmother hired me to find Adrian. I was hoping you might be able to help." Sophia looked up at him, and the pain in her eyes was so raw that Marcus felt it like a punch to his chest. "He's dead," she whispered. "I know everyone thinks he just ran away or that he'll turn up in some hotel somewhere, but I know he's dead. I can feel it." Her voice broke on the last word, and tears spilled down her cheeks. Marcus sat down beside her, giving her space but offering his presence. "What makes you so certain?" he asked gently. "Because Adrian wouldn't leave me," Sophia said fiercely, anger mixing with her grief. "Everyone thinks we were just cousins, just family, but we were more than that. We were in love. Real love, the kind that doesn't care about what's appropriate or acceptable or advantageous. And he wouldn't have left without telling me, without taking me with him." She looked at Marcus with desperate eyes. "You have to understand. We were planning to leave together. After the board meeting, after he got control of his trust fund, we were going to disappear. Start over somewhere no one knew us, somewhere we could just be us without all of this." She gestured around at the opulent conservatory, at the mansion beyond, at the entire suffocating world of wealth and expectation. "Did anyone else know about your plans?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Sophia's face went pale. Adrian thought his grandmother knew something. She'd been watching us differently, making comments about family loyalty and the importance of maintaining appearances. "And my father." She stopped abruptly, fear flashing across her features. "Your father knew," Marcus finished for her. It wasn't a question. Sophia nodded miserably. "He found some of our messages. He was furious. He said we were bringing shame to the family, that what we were doing was sick and wrong. He threatened to cut me off completely, to make sure I never saw Adrian again. But Adrian said it didn't matter, that once he had control of the company, he could protect us both." She laughed bitterly. He really believed that. He believed that money and power could solve everything. But he was wrong. Marcus felt the pieces starting to come together, forming a picture that was as ugly as it was clear. "Sophia, I need you to think very carefully. The night Adrian disappeared, did you see him after dinner?" She hesitated, and Marcus could see the war playing out behind her eyes, the desire to tell the truth battling against the instinct for self-preservation that had been bred into her since birth. Finally, she nodded. "We met by the pool around 10:30. It was our spot, the place where we could be alone. He seemed different that night, scared in a way I'd never seen him before. He said something was wrong, that he'd discovered something about the company, about his grandmother and my father. He said the money wasn't clean. The generations of the Westbrook fortune had been built on things that would destroy them all if they came to light." "What kind of things?" Marcus pressed. "He didn't get a chance to tell me," Sophia said, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Someone was coming. He told me to go back inside, that it wasn't safe for me to be seen with him. I didn't want to leave, but he insisted, so I left." Fresh tears streamed down her face, I left him there alone, and I never saw him again. That's the last memory I have of him, walking away while he stood by that damned pool, looking so scared and so alone. Marcus reached out and squeezed her hand briefly, a gesture of comfort that he rarely allowed himself with clients. But Sophia's pain was genuine, and it touched something in him that he usually kept locked away. "You may have saved your own life by leaving when you did," he said quietly. Then he stood, his mind racing with the new information. "I need to examine the pool area. Don't tell anyone about our conversation, especially not your father or your grandmother." Sophia grabbed his arm as he turned to leave. "Mr. Hale, when you find out what happened to Adrian, and I know you will, I can see it in your eyes, promise me something. Promise me you'll make them pay, all of them. They took everything from us, and they need to pay." Marcus looked at her, at the mixture of grief and rage and desperate hope in her young face, and he made a promise that he knew he might not be able to keep. "I'll find the truth," he said, "and I'll make sure justice is served." The walk down to the pool felt like a descent into something deeper than just the physical landscape. The temperature had dropped even further, and the wind cut through Marcus's coat like knives made of ice. The infinity pool stretched before him, its surface completely frozen now, the ice thick and opaque. He stood at the edge, looking down at that white expanse, and felt his instincts screaming at him. Something was wrong here. Something was hidden. He walked around the perimeter of the pool slowly, examining every inch, and that's when he saw it. A faint discoloration near the shallow end, barely visible against the white ice but unmistakable to someone trained to spot such things. Blood. Not much. Just a few drops that had been quickly covered by falling snow and new ice, but enough. Marcus's heart rate picked up as he followed the trail. The spots of blood led from the pool house, a luxurious structure that was more like a small residence than a changing room, across the deck, and then stopped abruptly at the edge of the pool. He knelt down, his gloved hands carefully brushing away snow from the ice surface. And there, just beneath the frozen layer, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A hand, pale, motionless, suspended in the ice like an insect trapped in amber. Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands and called the local police, then called Victoria Westbrook. "I need everyone to stay in the house," he said when she answered, his voice harder than steel. "No one leaves, no one makes any calls. Do you understand me, Mrs. Westbrook? Your grandson didn't disappear. He was murdered, and his body is in your infinity pool." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long that Marcus thought she might have hung up. Then Victoria spoke, and her voice carried no surprise, no shock, no horror. Just a tired resignation that confirmed Marcus's worst suspicions. "I see," she said simply. "I suppose it was inevitable that someone would eventually find out." "You knew," Marcus said, feeling sick. "You knew he was dead. You knew he was in the pool. This whole thing, hiring me, the concerned grandmother act, it was all theater." "Not all of it," Victoria said, and now there was something in her voice that might have been regret. "I didn't know where the body was until you just told me. But yes, I knew my grandson was dead. I knew because I watched my son kill him." The confession hung in the frozen air between them, transmitted through cellular signals and satellites, but feeling as intimate and terrible as if she were standing right beside him. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to process what he was hearing. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you let this happen? Why would you protect Richard?" "Because Adrian was going to destroy everything," Victoria said, her voice cracking for the first time. "He found out about the offshore accounts, about the money laundering, about all the carefully buried secrets that have kept this family powerful for 3 generations. He was going to go public, going to burn it all down, because he thought it was the right thing to do. He was going to sacrifice everything our family built, all in the name of his moral crusade and his sick infatuation with his own cousin." Marcus heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Richard approaching across the snow-covered deck. The man's face was pale but composed, and in his right hand he carried a gun. Behind him, at the window of the main house, Marcus could see Victoria watching, her phone still pressed to her ear. "I'm sorry it had to come to this, Mr. Hale," Richard said, his voice steady despite the weapon in his hand. "You were supposed to investigate, file a report, eventually conclude that Adrian had run away. You weren't supposed to actually find him. No one was supposed to find him until spring, when the ice melted and the body floated to the surface. By then, the evidence would have been degraded, the trail cold. It would have looked like an accident. Tragic case of someone swimming in winter conditions and succumbing to hypothermia." Marcus kept his hands visible, his mind racing through scenarios. The police were at least 20 minutes away on these mountain roads. He needed to keep Richard talking. "It wasn't an accident, though, was it? You killed him deliberately. You hit him. That's where the blood came from, and then you held him under the water until he drowned. Then you broke the ice and submerged the body, letting the freeze preserve it like a time capsule of your crime." Richard's expression twisted with something ugly. "He gave me no choice. He was going to ruin everything, the company, the family name, his own future. And for what? For some juvenile fantasy about being in love with Sophia? About exposing our business practices to satisfy his overdeveloped conscience?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I spent 25 years building that company while my mother groomed her precious grandson to inherit everything. I worked 16-hour days, made the hard decisions, got my hands dirty with the kind of negotiations that Adrian was too pure to touch, and my reward was going to be watching him tear it all down from his moral high ground." "So you decided to kill him," Marcus said flatly. "Your own nephew, Victoria's grandson. You murdered him in cold blood and left him frozen in this pool like some kind of macabre sculpture." "I protected this family," Richard snarled, something my mother should have understood but was too blinded by her favoritism to see. Adrian was a threat, and threats must be eliminated. It's business, it's survival. He raised the gun slightly. "Just like you're a threat now, Mr. Hale. I'm sorry about this, I really am. But you must understand I've already killed once to protect this family. Doing it again doesn't make me any more guilty than I already am." The wind howled around them, and Marcus saw his death in Richard's eyes. But he also saw something else, a flicker of movement in the conservatory windows. Sophia, her face pressed against the glass, her phone in her hand, recording, documenting everything. "You're right," Marcus said, keeping his voice calm even as his heart hammered in his chest. "It doesn't make you any more guilty, but it does make you more stupid. Your daughter is recording this conversation right now. The police are already on their way. And even if you kill me, even if you somehow manage to dispose of my body too, it's over. The truth is out." Richard's head snapped toward the conservatory. And in that moment of distraction, Marcus moved. He dove to the side as the gunshot cracked through the frozen air, the bullet passing close enough that he felt the heat of it. He rolled behind the pool house wall, his own gun, always carried, always ready in his hand now. "It's over, Richard," Marcus shouted. "There's no way out of this. Adrian's body is evidence. The blood trail is evidence. Your daughter's recording is evidence. Your mother's confession on my recorded phone line is evidence. Put down the gun and we can end this without anyone else dying." But Richard was beyond reason now, beyond the careful calculations of a businessman weighing risks and rewards. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and he knew it. "If I'm going down," he screamed, "I'm taking all of you with me." He fired again, the bullet slamming into the pool house wall inches from Marcus's head. Marcus returned fire, not aiming to kill but to disable, to stop the threat without adding another death to this already tragic story. His bullet caught Richard in the shoulder, spinning him around. The man fell to the deck, his gun skittering away across the ice-covered stone. The silence that followed was broken only by Richard's sobbing and the distant wail of police sirens growing closer. Marcus walked over and kicked the gun farther away, then stood over the man who had destroyed his own family in the name of protecting it. "It wasn't worth it," Marcus said quietly. "Whatever secrets you were protecting, Whatever empire you thought you were saving, it wasn't worth Adrian's life. It wasn't worth any of this. Richard looked up at him with eyes that were already dead, already seeing the prison cell that would be his home for the rest of his life. "You don't understand," he whispered. "You can't understand what it's like to build something, to sacrifice everything, only to watch it being taken away by someone who never had to work for any of it." "You're right," Marcus said. "I don't understand murder. I don't understand how you could look at your nephew, at a young man who was just trying to find his own path, and decide that his death was an acceptable price for your ambition." The police arrived then, flooding the estate with officers and crime scene investigators. Marcus watched as they carefully began the process of recovering Adrian's body from its frozen tomb, using heat lamps and special tools to melt the ice without damaging the evidence preserved within. It took 3 hours, and by the time they finally lifted Adrian's body out of the pool, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold that seemed obscene given the circumstances. Sophia stood at the conservatory window the entire time, watching as her cousin, her love, was finally brought back into the light. When they carried Adrian's body past on a stretcher, covered with a black tarp, she finally collapsed, her grief too large to be contained any longer. Victoria Westbrook was arrested as an accessory after the fact. Her recorded confession, combined with Sophia's video and the physical evidence, made the case airtight. Richard was charged with first-degree murder. The Westbrook empire, as Adrian had predicted, began to crumble as investigations into their financial dealings revealed decades of fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Marcus stood by the empty pool one last time before he left the estate. The ice had been broken and removed as part of the investigation, leaving behind only water that seemed impossibly dark and deep. He thought about Adrian, about a young man who had been born into privilege but had wanted something more: truth, love, freedom from the suffocating expectations of his family. He thought about how that desire for something real had cost him everything. "I hope you found peace," Marcus said to the ghost he felt hovering over that infinity pool. "I hope wherever you are now, you're finally free." As he walked back to his SUV, he saw Sophia standing by the front entrance, her belongings packed in a single suitcase. She looked small and lost and irreparably broken. But when she saw Marcus, she straightened her shoulders and met his eyes. "Thank you," she said simply, "for keeping your promise, for finding the truth." Marcus nodded. "What will you do now?" Sophia looked back at the mansion one last time, and when she turned to him again, there was something hard and determined in her expression. "I'm going to testify. I'm going to tell the whole world what my father did, what my grandmother allowed, and then I'm going to use every penny of my inheritance, assuming there's anything left after the lawsuits, to establish a foundation in Adrian's name. Something that fights corruption, that helps people trapped in families like mine, that makes something good come out of all this death and betrayal." "He would have liked that," Marcus said, and meant it. He watched her walk away, getting into a taxi that would take her to the airport, to a new life, to whatever future she could build from the ruins of her family. Then he climbed into his SUV and drove away from the Westbrook estate, leaving behind the frozen pool and the frozen family and the frozen body of a young man who had died trying to do the right thing. The snow continued to fall, covering his tire tracks, covering the bloodstains, covering everything in a blanket of white that made the world seem pure and untouched. But Marcus Hale knew better than to trust appearances. He always had, and he always would. What do you think happened to the Westbrook empire after the truth came out? Did justice truly prevail, or did wealth and power find a way to survive even this scandal? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories about crimes hidden behind mansion walls, about families that destroy themselves in the pursuit of power, and about investigators who refuse to let the guilty escape justice, make sure you subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Until the next case.